in running facilities. Corporal punishment and isolated detention and punishment must be prohibited, and there should be consistent monitoring of the conditions in this setting. This is subject to the general child rights principle that children should only be detained as a measure of last resort. As the country already has a juvenile justice law, it should introduce more measures to divert young people from this detention system, as well as to ensure more trial and retention measures. It should not pass unnoticed that closed institutions tend to have a subculture which is negative, linked with abuse of power. They might also be a breeding ground for corruption and exploitation of the inmates. This country should thus aim more strongly to comply with international rights law on this issue and work towards more non-custodial and community-based measures, coupled with reform of the law enforcement system and improved quality of the judiciary and related law enforcement. There should be more access to legal aid and members of civil society as helpers to open up space for accused persons and detainees with support geared to empathy rather than retribution. 6. Civic and political space. With the formation of the new administration in 2023, the Special Rapporteur has been watching with keen interest to see whether there would be liberalization of the civic and political space. Regrettably, to date, this has not taken place. Political detainees continue to be detained, and human rights advocates and environmentalists continue to be prosecuted for incitement and related offences in exercising their right to freedom of expression, peaceful assembly, and their quest for justice. Even during the presence of the Special Rapporteur in this country, even during my presence in this country, there are reports of some groups being intimidated and or arrested in breach of their rights. When there is a call to shun the draconian nature of the law, the formulaic response from some official quarters tends to be that, quote, everything is done in accordance with the natural law, unquote. It is thus hoped that the new generation of politicians plus can leave that cliche behind and opt for a more inspiring dictum, namely, quote, everything must be done in accordance with national law that complies with international law, particularly international human rights. Unquote. Second, business and human rights. At a time when the country is moving towards its vision to be a developed country by 2050, the advent of new local and transnational businesses invites preparation and precaution in regard to the impact of business on human rights. To guide the global community on the subject, there are the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, which underline three mutually reinforcing duties, namely, the state's duty to protect the rights of people, the business sector's duty to respect the framework of protection, and their shared responsibility, governmental and business sector, to remedy harm. A key stakeholder which should be brought on board more directly is the range of businesses in the country which should adopt due diligence measures in their operations, such as to measure impact on human rights. This opens the door to interfacing with labor rights, investment law, environmental law, and human rights defenders, including the various groups noted above, such as indigenous people. Momentum is needed to set a pace in policy and practice on this issue of business and human rights, which opens the door to transparency, which may also help to counter corruption. It is hoped that this issue can be taken up soon, as I, the Special Rapporteur, raised this item with the apex of the administration during my visit to the country in December 2023. 8. Stakeholdership. Official circles state that there are a myriad of media and NGOs in the country, thousands and thousands. Education with space for indigenous languages is available to some extent. It is provided with a view to subsuming those languages under the national language rather than to preserve those indigenous languages for posterity. It is essential that indigenous peoples have more access to decision-making positions. They should have the space to be their own advocates of change in their access to justice and the wherewithal of life. There should be more space for them in law enforcement and the political field from the local to the national level. One commentator during our visit added in the discussion, quote, "Rangers should be drawn from indigenous communities rather than outsiders to patrol the forests and related resources," unquote. Another added, quote, "They, indigenous peoples, their members, should become sub-district officials, judges, and members of political parties," unquote. While there have been policies on indigenous peoples, a national action plan on their rights is still missing. There should be a one-stop service to help these communities in their quest for indigenous rights. There's a need for a national forum or working group to enable them to dialogue with the authorities with concomitant budgeting. Data gathering and periodic census are essential to capture the situation concerning indigenous peoples and to motivate resources, including scholarships, to respond to their needs. Social awareness on indigenous peoples can also be nurtured through more education on their culture, as well as possibly a national and or international festival on indigenous arts and culture. Cultural diversity derived from indigenous communities under the umbrella of international law should be part of cross-cultural education as their value added. 5. Prison system. The Special Rapporteur is conscious of the efforts of the authorities to support alternative methods of dispute resolution, as well as to reduce overcrowding in prison. Yet, much of the bottleneck is due to the tendency to detain pre-trial cases, when the preferred option should be to ensure bail and non-custodial measures. Many of the cases are also in relation to drugs offences, which would be better dealt with via community-based rehabilitation rather than incarceration. The heavy hand of law and order often results in people being arrested all too easily under the morass of laws, with the poor and less educated subjected to quick or summary justice, sending them to long prison terms without full access to legal aid and safeguards in their right to a fair trial and appeal. Women deserve to be treated with greater dignity. Often, the programs available in prison are gender insensitive, relegating the training of women inmates to sewing and home economics, rather than offering the full spread of activities available to men, such as training on engineering and automotive repairs. coupled with a wider spread of subjects to enable sustained literacy in an increasingly digitalized world. With regard to children, the general principle is that they should be separated from adults if they are to be housed in the same facility, unless it is a parent-child relationship. Preferably, they should be in a separate facility with specially trained personnel to deal with them. The facilities should not be run by those who are used to running adult prisons. A community-based rehabilitation approach should be integrated into the preparation before the facility is operational, rather than be added as an afterthought later on. A more healthy mix would need to involve the Ministry of Health in cooperation with the Ministry of Social Development.
The question is about the test of cybercrime. As we noticed that there are a lot of reports about the cybercrime test in Cambodia specifically. So I would like to take this opportunity to ask your opinion. So do you think the test of cybercrime in Cambodia would lead to affect the human rights in Cambodia as well as affecting the other sectors? For example, like will it affect to the investor both locally and internationally have concern to invest in Cambodia? And if you think the test of cybercrime will affect to the reputation of Cambodia, could you provide investors from both locally and internationally to invest more in Cambodia? Thank you.
Thank you. Not so much this time, but a part 2 visit. And you can see in the press statement, we dealt very specifically with cybercrime, particularly online scams. And you know very well it affects many nationalities and still in the news. In the news all the time, and we advised, we consulted, I went to no deal, I visited compounds, I saw the doctors, and we know that you have an anti-policy, we welcome that, but it's really a question of implementation against cybercrime, particularly on online scams and related to trafficking. In a good sense, I think there's a bit more openness, and we've been hearing quite a lot of statistics from the authorities actually, to how many have been assisted and sent back and so on. It's slightly more opening in terms of data and transparency. The issue very much is to implement well the laws that you have. You have the anti-trafficking law, you have criminal law, you have mutual legal cooperation with neighboring countries, you have the ASEAN anti-trafficking convention. So it's not a matter of missing laws or lack of laws, and implementation against crimes. And really, this is something that everybody's concerned about, and we should encourage good implementation, which is the crunch. It's not a lack of law and policy that you have. Now, in that perspective, we always raise the issue of non-punishment of victims. Why? Because people who are tricked to become scammers, they're tricked to come here to defraud, to scam, to prey on other people. They are actually victims, even though they're scamming off other people once they come here. Because they're tricked to come here. They're tricked to come here to trick other people. So we would prefer to enable screening procedure, screening possibility to enable victims to be discovered and then to treat them as victims rather than to treat them as illegal immigrants, and sent back, also treat them as illegal. So I think that's a very important, humane entry point in terms of screening to find out who's what and who's being tricked to trick others, and to use processes which open the door to humane response rather than just to criminalize everybody as criminals, even though they are victims. So that's then the authorities know it's a question of how to implement well, and they have sought cooperation with neighboring countries as well as the UN. In terms of the investor effect, well, cybercrime is also a certain investment in bad investment, isn't it? So you're really having to counter bad investment in terms of crime. And crime is also a business, and that's why we have to counter bad business and promote good business. So I hope that what I said about business human rights you need to look at it slightly from business advice and due diligence to try to open the door to transparency to counter bad business, because they all have to prove that they are going to do or do something good for human rights rather than just come in and enjoy whatever they want to do. And then, of course, that's also a facade for bad business to come in. So transparency of business sector is very important. And if you have good investment climate, not crime-related investment, then you will also be open to more good investment coming in. And so we encourage very much, as I said in my 8th pillar, that you can see that